One is about um, the budget is deficit.
Yes.
And when you're in office, what specific measures will you do to address that?
You cannot help having a deficit, especially now, when when all other world economies, the OECD, recommend that governments continue fiscal stimulus and pump priming of the economies. You can only hope that your pump priming is done in the right way as to spur investments which will block out the deficit and try to balance the budget at a future time. But right now, additional financing to plug the deficit and additional or probably even bigger deficit than this year's 290 billion is in the offing. I don't think anybody can deny that. Because a lot of services, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of social amelioration programs, and a lot of pump priming activities are essential. So, my personal target is to try to balance the budget at 2014, year 2014. And hopefully, through a combination of measures, but the most important thing is confidence in the country, stability of the country on a national security level. Because I mean, any activity which occurs in Basilan, which is not in a violent activity, is equated to Manila. There's no difference to a foreigner's mind. So, thirdly, we focus with peace and order in the offing. We focus on a massive blast for tourism. Right now, our problem with tourism is twofold. Number one, people don't know about us that much. But number two, assuming that they did, we don't have any place to put them. We only have the capacity for 3 million tourists a year. Now, with the passage of the new Tourism Act, hopefully, in an ecologically sustainable manner, we will have the capacity to admit more tourists, particularly, and what's increasingly encouraging is that Gibo has the capacity now to accept international flights. There are more and more tourists from Europe coming in. There's a greater mix of tourists. Now, having said that, we should address the gap twofold. Number one, not merely the physical infrastructure gap, but the person gap. We have to have more competence, not merely in English, but in other languages, because we do not expect our tourists to speak our language or to try to communicate with us. We should cater, because we're offering a service to them. So we have to have an active program, hopefully in line with basic education reform roadmap of offering foreign languages at the high school level, even at the public school level. Recently, Secretary Lapus, I believe, before I left the cabinet, signed an MOA with Ambassador Luis Arias of Spain. Spain will once again finance some public schools to teach Spanish. Why? Because there is increasing global demand for both skilled and high-level executives who are Spanish-speaking. And we lost that competitive advantage that we once had. Even assuming our 21 units of Spanish in college would not allow us to speak conversational Spanish, it would be easy to brush it up. Once you get through the conjugations of verbs and all that, which everybody hated. So, I think that's the second thing. Thirdly, we must have some form of political stability for everything to work. And that's a function already of leadership, how you reach out to the disparate segments of the political spectrum. And naturally, too, you will have to have local government supervision, so that local governments, which are the first link sometimes with a lot of people, have best practices ingrained in them. Those are some of the things. But with the deficit, it's a reality we must live in.
Yeah.
And it's just have to commit ourselves nationally to be a more productive society so that we can pay.
In relation to that answer, how about the leakages They say that corruption right now is not anymore 40% but 50%.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I really don't think so. Having worked in government, I can't talk about local governments now. I can only talk about national government. National government's already constrained at the seams, especially in its operations expenditures. No?
So during your regime, will you not be looking into this said
You
corruption?
have to, but corruption is merely a function of what you have to do. It is not the function. Okay? Now, if you focus your campaign solely on corruption, then you will be just a crime fighter or graft buster, and that's not what the president is.
Yeah, but
Corruption
it's
is,
one of the
it is one of, it is an aspect, but it is not the aspect. And I have, I have, I can proudly say that there was minimal corruption in my department during my time.
Yeah, that's in your department.
Well, then when you're president, all the departments are under you. So it follows that you can do it. You've done it in your own home, you can export it, hopefully. Hopefully. So, I mean, and there are two things to solve corruption too. The positive and the negative. The problem is the Philippines tends to curb corruption on the negative. It's prohibited, you punish. But it does not give incentives to public officials for good behavior. Does not. And you cannot work in a system today's day and age without incentive for good behavior. If somebody saves the Philippines a billion pesos a year because he invents a process, he will not get a bonus. No way. But if he steals about 1,000, theoretically he's caught, he's convicted, he faces a prison term. I don't think there's balance there. That's not a carrot and a stick, it's all stick and no carrot. I think that's the best way for me to try to solve corruption too. You try to avoid people getting tempted by building up their fortitude materially. I mean, morality is very important, but we know that not only the soul counts, but also the stomach. You have to eat also. And right now, it's not merely a question of eating, it's a question of quality of life, which all people aspire for. Let's be very realistic with that. And that can only be done very difficultly, though, through public sector reform. And that is a big challenge.
My second question is from a